Here is the mental trick that's going to kind of force you to go no contact after a break. And I say force you because what I learned through experience is that in life we are motivated by two things, mainly by two things, pain and pleasure. And pain is a far stronger motivator than pleasure. So this means that we would do way more to try to avoid pain than we could do to seek pleasure. Now, the way I use this to my advantage is that I started to link pain to going back and reaching out and trying to get in contact with the person that I was in a relationship with. And the reason I did that is not because he was a bad person, not because I wanted to revenge, and not because any of that, but because I knew that staying in touch was going to hurt me more than benefit. And I knew that I needed that space. I needed that distance to be able to allow my body, my brain, to start living and reorganizing my life without this person being part of it. Right now, this takes time because what happens is that when we are in a relationship with someone, everything in our lives and in our psyche reflects that. Our bodies, the connections in our brains, the feelings, everything we do with them becomes a trigger. Their voice, pictures, memories, even places and people. So the day I started realizing that if I go back and reestablish contact with this person, this means that I'm going to stay within this toxic cycle of not being able to let go of someone who is not useful for me. And you know what? In the beginning, it meant that every time I wanted to contact him, I wanted to call or text, I had to remind myself of that. Okay, well, this is something painful. This is something that on the long run, it's going to keep me in pain. And I don't want to extend that pain. I know that this is not going anywhere. So why would I keep doing it? Now, the other thing that I did is that I reminded myself of the painful moments in the relationship. Every time he made me cry, every time he put me down, every time he was not supportive, every time he bailed on me, every time I needed him and he was not there, every single time I experienced pain, I reminded myself of that. And the reason is because usually what happens after a relationship ends, there's something called selective memory. Selective memory means that we choose the moments or the memories that we keep reminding ourselves with according to the beliefs and perceptions that we have about this relationship. So for example, if I'm having difficulty letting go and I constantly want to call this person, to text, now chances are I'm only focusing on the moments of the relationship in which I experienced so much pleasure. You know, the moments we connected the most, the moments he was there for me, supportive, you know, we did something exciting together, we went to that place. Now, the problem with that is that over time, we tend to generalize those moments until it creates a false perception of the reality of the relationship that was going on back then. So this means that we tend to forget about the toxicity, we tend to forget about the pain, we tend to forget about how much our well-being was struggling because of that. We only focus on the moments that we experienced pleasure. And that's why we keep saying, oh, he was the fantastic person, he was the right person for me. And I just keep, grieving the one person in the world I thought was suitable for myself. The reality is completely different. It was completely different, but I remember it differently because I choose to focus on the best moments of the relationship. And when you flip that on its head, and instead of remembering the best moments ever, you start to remember the painful moments. Believe me, when you do this, you are not going to want to reestablish connection with this person because you know what? You're going to remember how painful it was to be with that person. And so for me, for example, I always remind myself of how my physical health got affected. This is one of the very common patterns of women who have an anxious attachment style. Once fear or anxiety is triggered because they feel that this person is going to get away from them, is going to leave them, we start to experience all kinds of physical symptoms of anxiety. And I'm telling you, this is not a pleasant experience at all. And if you are someone who have an anxious attachment style, you know exactly exactly what I'm talking about. You know, acidity, the stomach pain, the different kinds of chronic pain that I struggled with. I was like, no, I'm not going to put myself into that torture one more time. So this means that in the beginning, especially in the first, I don't know, couple of months, I had to constantly remind myself, I had to remind myself a few times every day why I let him go, why that relationship did not work, and why it was going to be extremely painful unless I choose to break that cycle and not go back to him. In the beginning, it might take some energy, it might take some commitment and discipline, but when you combine this with the nervous system regulations that I mentioned in previous videos, then things become less challenging. I'm telling you, if you reflect back on your life and you start to look at the things that you achieved, you're going to most of the time find it that you did your best, that you achieved that thing because of one of two motivators. It was either pain or pleasure. So let's take advantage of this number one motivator that we have in our lives and make it work for our benefit. The last thing that I want to remind you is that you are not alone in this. There's so many people who are going through a heartbreak, and I know how difficult this is, especially if you have an anxious attachment style. So I know that you can do this. Take care of yourself. Let me know in the comments if you find any of this useful, and I'll catch you up in our next video. Take care of yourself.